Hey guys, this is Mitch with FinePoint CGI, and today we're going to talk about securing your Nakama server. So we're going to go through the process of talking about encryption keys. We're going to talk about how to do a custom configuration, and then we're going to talk about how to do HTTPS and TLS certificates right inside of Nakama using DigitalOcean. Unfortunately, you can't really use HTTPS without using some kind of load balancer, so we're going to talk about that. That's what I have in store for you guys today. Let's go ahead and get started. All right, so the first thing we have to talk about is how we can set up a custom configuration for our Nakama instance. So basically, when we are doing our Nakama configuration, so you can see if I go out to our Nakama server here, you can see we have our docker compose.yaml. So I'm going to hit cmd, and that's going to bring up a command prompt here, and I'm going to type code space dot, and that will my little Visual Studio code here. And you can see in our Docker Compose file right here, you can see that we have our Nakama stuff right here, right? And basically, we need to go ahead and make a few adjustments to allow us to have a way to configure it. So we need to come into here in this section right here, and we need to make a quick small adjustment. So you can see right here, we're saying bin/sh -etcx. That's basically saying, hey, we're going to run this command right here and run through it, right? So we need to actually adjust it so that way we can have an actual configuration here. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say --config space / and I get to actually come up with what I want to name it. So when we do our Docker Compose, we're going to need to place this configuration somewhere. Now you can see in our volume here, we already have /nakama/data. So I'm just going to change that. So I'm going to say nakama /data /config.yml. And that's going to allow us to actually have a YAML file for our configuration. And what we'll do is we'll come into here. We're going to right click new folder, and we'll create a folder called data like that. We'll right click, add in a new file, and we'll call it config.yml. So with this Docker config, or I guess this Nakama config, this is very specific to Nakama itself, right? So this is how we configure our Nakama. We could put in a lot of parameters in here, and there is a page on the Heroic Labs here that could talk about all the different configurations and what they're useful for and why you want to use them and things like that. I'm not going to go into all of that. This is all about just securing your actual connection and things like that. So we're not going to run through this, but just know that this exists. And there's a lot here, and I'm sure as time goes on, we can discover what all of these mean and why they exist. But in our case, we can come in here and type name : and we can set up a name. So I'll just call this Nakama-node-1. We can come in here and say data_dir : quote ./data/, and that'll just give us a data directory. And then we can do some small configurations. So if we come in here and we take a look at this, you'll see that they have different names here. So like server configuration or common properties, right? But you'll notice there's session.encryption key. And if I remember correctly, they have it right here, session, then .encryption key. So anytime you want to make a parameter here, you can come in here and say like statutory.url, or you can look at this flag here and you'll have the flag. So it's up to you on which one you want to do. Now, when we want to do our encryption key, I'm going to come in here and just copy this session.encryption key, right? And we'll come in here and we'll paste. Except that's not going to work. And the reason why that's not going to work is because the way that YAML operates is you need to path to that object. So you can see I'm going to path in to this object. So I'm going to tab in twice into encryption key : and then I can put in whatever encryption key I want here. Now, typically, when I tell people to do encryption keys, I tell people to generate some kind of value here. Now you could make whatever you want, but in my case, I'm going to do a 32 alphanumeric number, and you'll see this is called random.org, and they have a way to do this. So I'll just say get strings, and it'll just generate a couple of random strings. So I'll copy this guy, and you can see how I configured it. Generate 2, 32, check all 3 of these. Each string should be unique, and identical strings are not allowed, and then just get strings, and it will randomly generate you some strings. You can copy it, and then you can come in here and paste. And there you go. So now you have a complete unique key that's gibberish, and nobody will know it, and nobody will be able to use it other than you. And now you can come in here and make some more adjustments. So there also is a refresh underscore encryption underscore key. And if you want to, you can make that into its own value. Now, in my case, I'm going to use the same key. The odds of somebody guessing a 32-bit key that's completely random is extremely small. And if I remember correctly, somebody did some math a long time ago that it would take longer than the heat death of the universe to crack this encryption key. So I'm not super concerned with people coming in and trying to get a hold of my stuff. Now, from here, we also can set up what's called a server key as well. So we'll come in here and say socket : tab server underscore key : space quote, and we'll go ahead and use that other random number that I generated. Remember, I did 2 for a reason. We could just do that, and there we go. And that's really all we need to do to kind of secure our session and our server. So if we save this and then we head out to our command prompt here, right here, we can type docker compose up. And that's going to go ahead and reload our Nakama instance. So you'll see in a minute, it's going to reload everything and reset everything up. And then if I grab this guy while it resets this up, 127.0.0137351, like that, this is going to reset this guy. And it looks like it failed. So there's something here that broke. So let's open up Docker Desktop and take a look at it. So what I'm going to do is completely blow away my Docker stuff right here, and that'll just completely rip all this out, and we can start over from the beginning. Because there's probably something going on here that's a little bit finicky. And I know it seems like we're going to lose all of our data, but thankfully, our volumes will have all of that data. So I'm not super concerned with losing it. It's just something that we can just blow out, start over. Let's see if it makes it any better. And our server tutorial seems to be running, but our Nakama itself is not running. It says created, but it's not actually running it. So I'm thinking that something is wrong with our YAML here. So let's take a look at it really quick. So we have Nakama migrate up. That's probably fine. And then we have database address root cockroach 256. Yep. I'm going to pull exec out like this. And then I will pass in my Nakama config like so, double dash. That should be fine. I believe we have Metrics Prometheus port. That's probably fine. We don't need this name anymore because we're already doing it in our configuration. So we can pull that out. And database address, we do have that twice. You can see we have database address at the top and database address at the bottom. So let's see what happens if we just go with this for right now and see how that goes. So I'm going to come in here, bring it up, Docker compose up. Let's see if that is going to be better. Because if not, we might have to start over with how we have this set up. There might be something that I configured incorrectly. Right here, failed. Could not read config file path Nakama Docker YAML error open no such file or directory. So our config YAML is not existing in our data directory. Let's see what happens. Instead of doing :/ we just do data like that to Nakama Data. I think that would probably work better. And then we could probably pull our modules into our data folder. That way they exist inside of our data folder. So that way we're not losing out on our modules. I'm just kind of reshuffling this just a tiny bit to see if this will give us a better choice here. So let me stop this. Fatal message, encryption key cannot match. So you can see here, it says here our encryption keys cannot match. So let's go ahead and generate another one. For some reason, I thought that we could have them match. They cannot be matching. So let's grab random.org. Let's just generate another one. That's totally fine. And then we'll come in here, grab our config YAML. These guys can't match. So we'll just change this. So now we have 3 separate strings here. My fault. We'll go ahead and do that, and then we will go ahead and Control C like that. And there we go. You can see we have started up correctly. So now if we open up our local host here for our Nakama console, we go and log in with our admin account. You can see if we go into our configuration, we have all of our configuration stuff right here. So this is a good way for you to know like what you can configure and what is available to you. So if we take a look, you can see console.username, console.signing key, console.port, right? So you can change that. You can come in here and change your database address if you want to have a special database. So if you don't want to use CockroachDB and you wanted to use a different database, you could in theory. Or if you wanted to point it to a database that's not locally on that Docker container, you could also do that. And that's something that's really useful, especially if you're doing load balancing. And I feel like if we want to look at load balancing and all of those bigger topics, we could do that in a future video potentially. But if we scroll down here, you'll see that there is a session encryption key, and you can see it took our encryption key right here. You can see that it did the same thing with the refresh one as well. And it did it with the socket server key as well. So it's really nice because you get all of that capability right there. And it stops people from being able to run their Nakama game off of your Nakama instance because you've now created a custom unique key that they have to use to authenticate with your stuff. And now you might be wondering, okay, so that's really cool, which it is very useful. How do I change the default password? Because you can see here we have the console username right here, right? Well, that's actually really easy. If we take a look at our Nakama configurations right here, we can scroll up to the top and you'll see under console here, there is right here password and username. So what we can do is we can come in here and say enter backspace console : username : admin. And then if we want to change the password, all we have to do is copy this password : this is the password, like so. And now if we reboot our Nakama instance, so Control C, and then fire it back up, if we come over to our Nakama console, we come out here, we log out. When we log back in, admin password, right, which was what our previous password was. We try logging in, and it fails. But if we type, this is, whoops, no space. This is the password. You will see that now we can log in. And that is what this is useful for, is you can come in, you can change the admin password so people can't use your stuff. And so those are some of the major configuration things that you guys can do. Now, you might want to change the port, and that's really easy. It's just console.port, right? So you'd come in here and change this to port like that. And then you could change it to, 7456, right? And then it would change that password or that port. But just know that because you changed that port, that means that your 751 would also have to change over here in the Docker Compose file. So make sure that you pay attention to that. If there's stuff that you want to change when it comes to how the actual ports and procedures work, you may need to come in here and change it. But just know that you have that capability. And again, everything that's in that configuration section is what you can configure with Nakama. It's also how you set up Google authentication or Apple authentication and things like that as well. So I'm going to go ahead and save this YAML file here. So now the question is, okay, so now I need to actually use these encryption keys, right? So if we go into Godot here, if I hit play, now that those settings are in there, if I try to log in, you'll notice that it fails. Sending authorization, connection to host, server key is invalid right there. Auth token is invalid. And that's the power of changing that configuration. So if I head out to my script here, and this is the same for C#, so if you're watching this on the C# side, I'm not going to re-record the entire tutorial just to talk basically about Nakama, so forgive me if you guys see GD script. Just know that you go in and you change your authentication key, basically. So under here, under create client, we have default key. If we come into our stuff here, that's where this key right here comes in. So you'll copy this key, come in here and paste it. And now I can just hit play. And you'll see if I hit submit, there we go. It actually looks like it authorized. It got some of our information and all of that. And then I can come in here and hit get friends. You'll see that I pull back my friend as expected. And the nice thing is that authentication token that I got was encrypted using this guy right here. This encryption key right here is what is used to actually encrypt that data, if that makes sense. And same thing with the refresh encryption key. It's going to set that as our encryption key when we do our refresh token. So when it does a re-up, it will use that token, if that makes sense. And so that's primarily the two big ways to secure your stuff. Now the question is, okay, so we're all good, right? We're all secure. Well, no, unfortunately not. So if I come in here and I type Wireshark, there's this thing called Wireshark, and it's a way to do what's called sniffing packets. And people do this all the time. They sniff packets, they look for people's passcodes. That's what they do. And I'm not going to go through this. It's not a Wireshark tutorial by any means because that would be insane, but I can show you kind of what it does. So if I open up adapter for loopback, right? And I come in here and I apply a filter where I say :tcp.port ==. We'll hit enter and you'll see that we're going to get some information here. Now you can see that this is all a bunch of garbage, right? We can't really see any of the information. If we refresh this, we open up Wireshark here, you'll see that we get a transmission protocol. That's fine. That's all normal. If we hit submit, you'll see we pass in some data. Now, here's where things get interesting. If we click on this, you can see authenticate email, create trust true. And you can see right here, email test@gmail.com, password is password. That's called having a plain text password, and that's massively insecure. So that means anybody that logs in with your game, you're going to be able to see their stuff in plain text. So how do we stop that? That is where TLS comes in. And by the way, this is what happens when you do an RPC call as well. So if you do any HTTP calls to Nakama or anything that requires HTTP, like you're posting out to an address, it's going to be running into this issue. As soon as that acknowledgement comes in, though, it's going to start producing garbage. And the reason why is because as soon as the connection is created, it'll start trying to secure your stuff. It's not always perfect. You can see CID channel 1. So you can see here's some of our WebSocket data here. So see, some of this data is secure-ish because it's masked, but some of this data isn't. And again, that's where WebSocket's secure and where HTTPS comes in. So in order to actually encrypt your HTTP stuff, you can see right here, it says HTTP, right? So you'd think, okay, well, let's just do HTTPS, right? That makes sense. Well, if we run this, you'll see that when we hit submit, it fails. So what gives, right? Why is it failing? Well, the reason why is because when we do this, we're binding, we are requesting a certificate to encrypt all of our traffic. but the Nakama server doesn't have one to give us. So what does that mean? Well, basically what that means is that we can't use HTTPS without having some way to supply that certificate. So what's the proper way to do this? Well, the simplest way to approach this is by using a load balancer that's available by DigitalOcean. Now, you can set up your own load balancer, you can set up your own server, and I might cover that in the future. But for right now, I'll show you how it works using a load balancer. So if we head out to DigitalOcean here, you'll notice I already have one built right here. It's an NYC1 load balancer. So I'm not going to show you how to fully set up one just because there is some finickiness there that I don't want to remove this. I've already built it. So I'll show you how to build it, but I won't go through the whole process, if that makes sense. So first things first, let's go to our YouTube 2. Let's jump into our console because we need to reset our Nakama instance. So if we type ls cd nakama ls, you'll see that we have a docker compose.yaml. So if I type, so this guy has an IP address right here. This is the IP address for the public IP. So I'm going to go FileZilla and I'm going to go ahead and connect to that. So we'll connect to it. Our username is going to be, and for us to be able to transfer files up to our server, we're going to use FileZilla. Now we need to actually create an SSH key for our FileZilla. So I'm going to come in here and open up PuttyGen. It is probably one of the more common ways to do it. What I'll do is I'll come in here, generate out a key. And for my passphrase, I will set it to an actual passphrase. So I'm not going to tell you guys what it is. And then I will click save public key. I'm going to go ahead and put that in my downloads folder or my documents folder as public and private. Like that. And so you'll see here, if I go out into my documents here, you'll see that I have a private and I have a public right here. And then we'll head out to our DigitalOcean droplet here and we'll type make dir /.ssh space chmod 0700 space .ssh touch tilde /.ssh /authorized underscore keys chmod 0644 tilde /.ssh /authorized keys. And you can see that it already exists, so that's good news. If we go sudo vim tilde /.ssh /authorized keys, you'll see that we have no authorized keys. And so we'll take this section here and we'll copy this. This is our public key. So we'll copy that and right click paste. And that will throw this guy in here. Now we need to save our key in here. So we'll hit escape :WQ enter, and that will go ahead and save it. And now we know that it should be good to go. So now we can save our private key here. So we'll save private key and we'll go ahead and do private. So it looks like I had an issue with my private key. I was just grabbing the wrong one. I was grabbing the wrong format. This is my public key, and then I have to save my private key. So I regenerated it and made some issues along the way there, but that's totally fine. That's on me. So now we'll go to FileZilla here. We'll come in here, we'll click edit settings, and that should pop up this guy right here. We'll go to SFTP. You can see I have one right here, which is my actual Nakama YouTube 1. So we'll hit add key file. We'll come out to our documents. We'll go find that private key that we generated right here called private.ppk. And to double check, I will save that private key to make sure it's the proper key. So save private key, save. Yes, I want to overwrite it. And then I will select that private key. So now that that has been set, we'll go over to the site manager, which should be, click on File, Site Manager, and here we go. And then we'll do a new site. We'll call it YouTube 2, like that. We're going to change this from FTP to SFTP because we want to use SFTP. We need to get our host number value here, so we'll grab that, paste, and our port is 22. For our login type, we'll do interactive. For our user, we'll type root, like that. And then we will see if this works. So we'll hit connect. It's going to say, hey, the host key is unknown, but I'm good with that. So we'll add that. And there we go. So now we can see our whole Nakama instance right here in our FileZilla. So now we can come in to our game here. So if we go to downloads, Nakama, server tutorial, we can see all of our stuff right here. So if we go into Nakama, here is some of my broken code here from when I did a test. So we'll pull that out. We'll grab this and just bring it over like that and go ahead and overwrite. We'll apply this as always, and it should pull in everything. You'll see we have our config, we have our modules, and we're good to go. So that's really cool. So now if we come into our console here and we Docker compose up like that, it will go ahead and run our Nakama instance. So now you'll see that it started our Nakama instance. So if we go out to our YouTube IP address, if I open up my server console, I paste this :7351, you'll notice that if I do admin password, it does not work anymore. And that's because, like before, we changed to this is the password, right? And there we go. Now we can get in here. So all of that security stuff just passed over to our production server. So now we can actually do this. So that's awesome. But all of this just basically got us to where we were, right? We're still using HTTP. So how do we actually do HTTPS? So this is where things are going to get really complicated. And the reason why is because we have to use a load balancer. So if we head back to DigitalOcean, and we go to the networking tab here, you'll see we have a load balancer here. Let's say we want to create a load balancer. So we'll click that button there. If you look, you can see we create a regional or a global. Now, when you create a global, you'll need to have domains and do a bunch of other stuff. So I'm not going to show you guys how to do that. But if we do a regional one and we select New York here, if we scroll down here, it says that we already have a load balancer here. That's fine. You can see we have network visibility. So do we want a private one or an external one? And we want an external one for our game. So you can see here, we could choose how big of a node do we want, right? So in our case, we just want one, right? Because we only have our one. And for our droplets, we can choose which droplets we want. So in my case, I want my YouTube 1 to be on that. So we'll select that. For our forwarding rules, we have to set it to be the Nakama rule set. So that's going to be HTTPS to or from our load balancer from our Nakama port, so 7350 to HTTP 7350. But now you'll notice it says select a certificate. So if we click that, you'll see I have a test one and I have a pass-through. So what does all this mean? Well, pass-through allows you to use a pass-through certificate. So basically, it's not going to create a certificate. It's going to expect that the data is going to be HTTPS to your Nakama instance. But you don't want to do that. You want to forward it through a HTTP message because you don't want Nakama to handle your certificates. That's one of the biggest mistakes that people make using Nakama is that they use their self-signed certificate. So, okay, I've convinced you, right? You want to use a non-self-signed certificate. So how do we actually do that? So this is where the complexity comes in. So if you click on new certificate, you'll notice that it says search for a domain on DigitalOcean. Now, this is where things get kind of painful. For you to have a certificate, you need to use a domain to actually get a certificate, or you can bring your own. So you can see here, you can pass in a certificate, private key, and a chain, which is a whole mess of a problem. But if you want to use Let's Encrypt, you have to have a domain. So how do you get a domain? Well, that is where Namecheap comes in. You can purchase a domain name from here, and typically they're relatively cheap. So if I look up find.cgi, you'll see that there is all sorts of domains here. Find.cgi.dev, app, inc, me, right? And there's some that are $3. There are some that are $4. There's some that are $45, right? And they all have their advantages and disadvantages. Typically, the certificate doesn't care if it's an org or if it's a net or if it's a dev or if it's an app. It doesn't matter. As long as you have a domain name, you are good to go. And you can see that I already own find.cgi, so don't take it from me, please. I already own this one. But when it comes to getting this, you can purchase it right straight through Namecheap. Now, that's great. So now I have a domain name, right? Let's just say you purchased find.cgi.org, right? What happens? Well, if I log into my Namecheap, you'll see here that I have different domain names. So if I scroll down here, you'll see I have find.cgi.io, I have .com, and I have XYZ. XYZ is the one that I'm using for my Nakama instance. And that basically allows me to have my Nakama instance. So if I click manage, you'll see this is my manage section. Now, in order to get this to work with your DigitalOcean system, you need to set this custom DNS right here under name servers to custom DNS. You see they have Namecheap Basic, Namecheap Web Hosting, and then custom. And then you have to set it to these name services right here. So ns1.digitalocean.com, ns2.digitalocean.com, and ns3.digitalocean.com. Once you do that, then you can look on their DNS lookup right here. So find.cgi.xyz. And if I click search, you'll notice that my record says, hey, find.cgi points to this IP address right here. You'll see that my NS records are all set to DigitalOcean. Now, this can take a while, okay? So it could take up to 48 hours for it to get valid. So I'm sorry to say that it does take a few moments to get it to show up. But once you have this set up, then you can go to create a load balancer, search for a domain, and select my domain. In my case, it's my domain, but that's just a thing. And then I can include all domains, and then I can name this certificate whatever I want. In my case, I named it test. In your guys' case, you can name it whatever you want. So once you have this certificate, you just click on this certificate. And then we need to create a second rule for 7351. And for the certificate, once again, I'll select my production certificate, HTTPS 7351, like that. Under advanced settings, we need to actually edit those. And the reason why is because if you don't, your load balancer will not work. And you might be asking, okay, but why, right? Like, why do I have to edit these settings? Because the way that Nakama works is it doesn't use 80 to determine if the droplet is responding. It uses 7350. So you have to set it to 7350 or else it's just not going to work. And you don't want to redirect, you don't need to proxy, and you do want to enable backend keep alive, and that should work. And then once you're happy, you just click create load balancer. Okay. And once you've created that load balancer, it will look like this right here. Now, let's go ahead and remove these two droplets so you can see what it does. So when you want to add a droplet, so I'll remove both of them, it'll look like this. When you want to load balance, you just choose a droplet, and then you select your droplet, YouTube, and in my case, it's going to be YouTube 2. Add droplet. And you'll see in a second, it's going to add it, and it's going to ping it and see if it's alive. Currently it is, because I made sure it was turned on, but it is alive. And now, once you have this, you should be good to go. So if we come in here and we type findpointcgi.xyz7351, you'll notice that we get the Nakama console. If I try to log in, and I pass in this, if I pass in password, you'll see that it fails the credentials. If I type this is the password, you'll see it lets me in. So this is our configured Nakama instance right here. But you'll notice that when I click on this right here, connection is secure, cookies and site data. If I click on connection is secure, you'll see that all of this stuff is private. The certificate is valid. And that's what we want, is we want a valid certificate. So this is huge for us. So what does this mean for us in terms of Godot, right? Well, if we change this to HTTPS and we change this to findpointcgi.xyz and we hit play, you'll see if I click on test, you'll see I have authorized and connected to my game. And if we go ahead and sniff our port here, and I come in here and I go file. I forgot how to do this. It's been longer than 5 seconds, so forgive me. If I capture my Ethernet, I believe it's going to be Ethernet. If I select that, continue without saving, and I hit play, and then I click test and I run through, you'll see I capture a bunch of packets. Okay, so I created my connection. But you'll notice something. You see this TLS? Look at all of this data, but it's all secure. We set our encryption message. We did a hello, we encrypted it, and we did our exchange. We sent our data right here. This is our login data, but you can see that it is completely encrypted. So nobody knows what that information is. And you can see we do a handshake message. We send out our login information. Right, let's see, hello, exchange. We send this right here is the your actual profile information. This right here is your friends and their friends' information, but it's all encrypted. So all of that data doesn't exist anymore. Everything is set up correctly, and we can't see that data. And that is how you create a secure connection within your project. Now, in a future tutorial, I'll show you guys how to host your own Nakama instance, and we could talk about creating your own load balancer, because it can be cheaper to host it yourself, though it's not always recommended to do it that way. But at this point, you guys have a pretty basic primer of how to configure Nakama, how to actually set up and configure some basic security, and then how to actually encrypt your data in transit for your Nakama instance. So if you like this video, go ahead and hit that like button. Hey, if you dislike this video, go ahead and hit that dislike button, because I am here to make content for you guys. This video was a viewer suggested video, so if you have any suggestions, please leave them in the comments below, and I'll be more than happy to take a look at them. I do have a snake game in the works, because I know some people wanted a basic tutorial on how to create something small and simple. And I also was talking to somebody about creating a Galaga-like game, so I figured that might be another good way to teach how to create a little bit more of a complicated game. So look forward to that. But if you have any suggestions, please leave them in the comments or jump on my GitHub. Link is in the description, and put in an issue. That's usually where I track all my things and what I'm up to. So it would be good for you guys to check that out. And hey, if you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comments below or jump on my Discord. Links in the description, and anybody there will be more than happy to help you out. But that is all I have for you guys today. So thank you so much again for watching, and I will see you all next time. Thanks.